Welcome, luxury enthusiasts, to the Luxury Travelers Podcast, hosted by Rodney George. The ultimate passport to opulent destinations, extravagant experiences, and unparalleled indulgence. Whether one is a seasoned jet setter or daydreaming of the next lavish getaway, the Luxury Travelers Podcast has it all covered. So buckle up and prepare for a journey into the lap of luxury. Now, your host.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time it is when you're finally getting around to watch this episode. I have a very special guest. We're still, as you know, we've been focusing a lot lately on the expedition area of the world of travel. And I have with me today Rachel Woodward, who is Vice President of Field Sales at Lindblad Expeditions. And she oversees the entire sales force team, including regional sales directors, to make sure that all of her travel partners around the country and around the world needs and requests are met. So Rachel, welcome to the show.
Well, Rodney, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to talk a bit about today about expedition segment and how this is a booming segment in travel right now.
Well, it is. It's booming. And, there's probably not a day goes by that we don't get a phone call or a walk-in into our storefront here in Naples. And people go, okay, we've been everywhere and done everything. Oh, really? Have you? Well, let's just see. And so expedition is something, especially as well equipped as you guys are with icebreakers, to take them to places that they never dreamed of going.
Yeah, it's quite exciting just to see this growth, particularly the past 5 years. There's well over, I think, 30 new expedition vessels. A lot of them primarily want to spend time in the polar regions, but what river cruising was 15 to 20 years ago is the growth we're seeing with expedition travel. What's really exciting for Lindblad, we are the founders behind this expedition adventure travel well over 55 years ago, where
Wow.
Lars Erik Lindblad led the first ever non-scientific trip to Antarctica in 1966, and then the following year to the Galapagos in 1967. His son, Sven, who is our CEO, used to lead safari game drives in East Africa. So what we were really trying to do is bring that safari-like experience of early morning game drives on Zodiacs. And this is where expedition travel started over 55 years ago. So we started with one vessel. By next spring, we'll have 20 vessels in our fleet.
So how many of those are coming in the next 2 years, 3 years?
Great question. Next year, we're launching 3 new ships. So 2 of them are Galapagos vessels. So we announced this past summer we're purchasing 2 Celebrity Galapagos vessels. One is a catamaran 16-passenger, and another is a 48-passenger vessel. So by next spring, we'll have 4 Galapagos vessels. And then we're also launching a vessel in Egypt called the Sun Goddess. So 3 vessels by next year, 20 in our fleet by next spring.
How many of those are PC5s? And for those of you who don't know what a PC5 is, Rachel, tell them what a PC5 is first.
Ice strengthened hull. So it's the highest class level you can have before an icebreaker. And we have 2 of those vessels in our fleet. So a couple years ago, we launched 2 brand new polar ships, stunning vessels. If you see a couple of vessels that are X-Vows, it has a different hull. But those are the National Geographic Resolution and National Geographic Endurance. They're 138 passenger vessels. And what this really allows, it's a smoother crossing across the Drake Passage. That's probably the number one question every operator gets. How rough is the Drake Passage? So these vessels all have dynamic stabilizers. And then having that X-Vow allows the vessels to head farther north up into the Arctic Circle, and then farther south in Antarctica.
Okay, so do you have any, are any of your ships icebreakers?
Not icebreakers, but PC5. So there's a couple other expedition companies that have those icebreakers, but for us, PC5, we're actually launching in, I want to say 2026. We have an Antarctic Circle voyage. So because it has that PC5, we're able to head farther south down into Antarctica, which is really exciting.
In comparison to the Arctic versus the North Pole, how close are you going to get to the true North Pole on an Arctic sailing with you guys?
Oh, great question. We offer, the Arctic is quite large. One of the questions we get a lot is, my clients want to go to the Arctic. Where exactly do they want to visit, right? Because we visit Norway, Svalbard, Iceland, Greenland, Canadian Arctic, and Northwest Passage.
How cold do you want to be?
Yeah, how cold do you want to be? So we're able, the really unique thing too, if clients want to see polar bears, right? We have a voyage called Land of the Bears. Now, because we have that PC5 vessel, couple of vessels, we're able to visit Svalbard earlier in the season in May. Most operators are visiting towards the end of June and
In
into
the summer
July.
months, yeah.
Yeah, so the earlier in the season that you're there, more ice, more opportunity, to see polar bears on ice. But we're able to head, as far north as we can. It all depends, though, of how much ice there is each season. But, being on a PC5 allows for as much exploration as we can have to have an opportunity to hopefully see polar bears.
Emphasis on hopefully, I guess, but still that going that early, you're a lot more likely to see them than you are in the summer months, I would guess.
Yeah. And, I always say too, sometimes, I'm sure you get those questions about, oh, my clients want to see the Northern Lights. There's no guarantee for that. We're visiting a very remote area of the world. Polar bears are out in the wild. So I always say never promise, guarantee that, but there's a good chance that clients will see that on a trip.
So speaking of the Northern Lights, because that's a big deal for some people, and it's always been rumored that the best place in the world to see the Northern Lights is Fairbanks, Alaska, because they don't have a lot of cloudy nights and that kind of thing. But in the Arctic region, on your ships, going earlier in the year probably gives you a greater likelihood of seeing the Northern Lights than if you're going in June or July, right?
Yeah, it varies. Sometimes too, you might be able to see them on a Arctic trip in September. But usually it's later in the season. There's some other operators that are operating in the winter months. That's probably the best time. But there have been a couple seasons where first, second week of September, where we have the vessels there, there's a chance to see it. What we had this year with the Northern Lights throughout the U.S., you never know, right? Even in Alaska.
Well, that was bizarre what we had in the U.S. this year. For those that were fortunate enough to be in one of the places where you could actually sit, because it was totally unexpected, I guess.
I know. And, speaking of, I know a lot of clients do have these bucket list trips. They want to see the Northern Lights. Another is the solar eclipse. So there's been a lot of interest for that. In 2026, there will be a solar eclipse in Iceland. So this is August 12th of 2026. We have two vessels that will be positioned around Iceland on the National Geographic Explorer and the National Geographic Endurance. So those August 9th trip, August 7th of 2026, they're selling really, really well because there's only a couple of operators that will be there, but another bucket list trip just for guests to consider. And, we're talking about destinations, Rodney. We've mentioned the polar regions, but we visit all over the world, well over 600 destinations, 6 continents. So there's a lot for guests to choose from when they travel in Lindblad.
Well, you guys are huge in as huge could possibly be in the Galapagos, right?
Yes, by next year, with taking delivery of these 2 new vessels, we'll have the most occupancy in the Galapagos. So we're doubled our occupancy. We've been operating there, well over 55 years. It's the only destination we're year round. And when we talk about clients that say they've been everywhere in the world, they might not be those cruisers, but they want to visit certain destinations. I think Galapagos is the best entry to expedition. The trips are shorter and it's closer to home for North American guests. We're year round. And the nice thing too with our voyages, choice and flexibility. We offer a 4-night trip, a 5-night trip, a 7-night trip, and you can combine these voyages with Machu Picchu land packages.
Okay, if you're doing Machu Picchu, are you utilizing what's that famous train, the Hiram Bingham train? Are you utilizing that on any of your tours?
Yes, we are. Yeah, and it's these trips sell quite well for us, our land components with the voyages itself. But for guests that are looking to check off these two remarkable destinations, I highly recommend booking the cruise portion with Lindblad and then also combining that on the land side.
Yeah, it's crazy to go to that part of the world and not do both.
100% agree. And I always say too, I've been to the Galapagos a handful of times. Every week is different what you're going to see. And there isn't a bad time to visit the Galapagos, whether or not your clients visit in January, April, summer, or the fall time. It's a great destination. Snorkeling is phenomenal. You can do up to 5 different activities a day. Everything is included too, which is really nice.
And I'm assuming you're saying that because it's so close to the equator that the seasons don't
exactly.
really...
And that's exactly, you touched upon that. Being so close to the equator, there isn't a bad time to visit. The water temperature might be a bit cooler in the fall because of the Humboldt current. We provide wetsuits. The snorkeling, though, is phenomenal. You're gonna have certain days where you're snorkeling with Galapagos penguins, manta rays, sea turtles, sea lions. They swim right up to you, and the wildlife there has no fear of humans. So once you go on your first expedition, you become hooked on it. More than likely, I say your next voyage will probably be to Antarctica or the Arctic. But we're seeing a lot of interest with clients that like river cruising. They like small vessels. They like to be in small towns. And that's what expedition cruising also offers. You're on small vessels traveling.
Yeah, those are small vessels, and that is an advantage because of all the different things that you're doing and the equipment changes and all that. You couldn't do that on a ship of multiple thousands of people.
No. And there's, certain destinations have limits for the number of guests you can have ashore. Antarctica, you can only have 100 guests ashore. So with being on a vessel, either 138, 148 guests, we are able to get guests, everyone ashore, some that are on Zodiacs exploring, some that are kayaking, and being on a smaller vessel, guests spend more time ashore. So that's just something to consider. Every operator is a little different there, but something that Lindblad believes in, will never go above 150 passengers. So, that's a big thing for us.
Now, I'm shifting a lot of gears here because you guys have a lot of gears. You guys also do some fairly unusual things in Alaska, I believe.
Yes, our Alaska product, it's just remarkable. This past summer, we were sold out of every Alaska voyage. So we are in Alaska from May through September. We have 4 vessels in Alaska, 2 48-passenger ships and 2 96-passenger ships. What makes us unique in Alaska? All 4 vessels are registered in the U.S. So we do not have to begin or end out of Vancouver, Canada. Most operators do. So
time out. For those of you who have a DUI or a DWI, that's very important because you cannot go to Canada, right?
That is true. And, with summer too, going through customs immigration, Vancouver, there's a lot of tourism there, large vessels embarking. So it's quite easy with us. We operate from Juneau to Sitka. We have multiple itineraries ranging from, 7 up to 15 days in length, but we're visiting small towns, right? It's not the large ports of call where Ketchikan you see on every itinerary. Really unique for us. The other big selling point too for Alaska, if your ships are not registered in the US, you cannot host your own excursions on a Zodiac. And as you know, Alaska excursions are really expensive. So with our ships being registered in the US, our expedition team, we partner with National Geographic. So we have scientists that travel with us, historians, botanists, geologists. They're hosting all the excursions. And as the vessels range from 48 to about 100 passengers, we can drop the Zodiacs down within 10 minutes. get guests on these zodiacs and explore ashore, seeing, humpback whales in the water, being close to some glaciers, and just some really unique experiences.
Well, I haven't experienced Alaska with you guys, but when you say you can be in the water in 10 minutes, how difficult or how easy is it for people who maybe have some mobility issues to get onto those zodiacs off your ships?
Another great question. We cater to all different activity levels, all different age groups, as well as mobility challenges. I just say guests need to be able to climb a flight of stairs, play around a golf, go on a mile walk. We can assist guests getting in and out of the Zodiac. So we always have an expedition team there. They use the sailor grip. So it's pretty easy to get in and out of the Zodiac, but it's more about, I would say, going ashore. The terrain can be a bit rocky. So guests just need to be able to walk themselves. If they're using a cane or a wheelchair, if they need assistance walking, it might not be the best product for them. But we have guests that have knee, hip problems. We're able to accommodate that.
If let's say that one spouse has an issue and the other one doesn't, is that person going to have any mobility issues on board if they have a walker or something, for example?
It varies by vessel. A couple of our Alaska ships, as they're much smaller, they don't have elevators. So
okay, I guess that should have been my question.
Exactly,
I guess,
exactly. So the two smaller vessels, National Geographic Seabird and Sea Lion, they do not have elevators. So
yeah.
I would probably look at National Geographic Venture or the Quest. They do have that. The great thing too, if you do have, a couple traveling together, family traveling together, not everyone wants to go exploring ashore. The vessels are very comfortable. We have a lounge area, board games, something really unique to our product. We have an open bridge policy, and not many expedition operators offer this. So, the bridge is open for guests. They can interact with the captain, the expedition team, searching for wildlife, being out on the bow of the ship. So you can actually, because the ships are so small, and we're able to get so close to these destinations in Alaska, the ports and glaciers, you can stay on board and see a lot of wildlife.
Well, that's good. And by the way, if the listeners have never been to the helm, if you will, on a ship, it's really fun to find out all the navigational applications they have so that they can avoid. We were on a ship earlier this year and we avoided a major low pressure system coming through at night. Well, most people don't know what low pressure does, but we were on the edge of it and the ship was quite rocky. If we had been in it, it would have been intolerable. So those kinds of navigation aids are really kind of fun to find out more about, and stabilization and those type of issues.
Yeah, and I'll share a little example. This past summer, I visited Greenland on National Geographic Resolution. Greenland is remarkable. I think over the next 5 years, it's going to be one of the most popular destinations. They just announced last week an international airport they're building in Nuuk. So there's going to be more tourism on the land side. Expedition cruise side, really, the only way you can visit right now are on these expedition ships. You visit these small towns, one of them being Ilulissat. It's one of the largest ice fjords in the world. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. After dinner, so there's these huge icebergs everywhere. After dinner, it's daylight almost 24 hours a day. I went up to the bridge about 9 p.m. I was up there with a captain, just him and I, as he's navigating past these icebergs. I almost had to pinch myself to say, where can I ever get an experience like this, where it's just me and the captain?
Well, that's amazing. And just the whole experience of being in a place that hasn't been that disturbed by the human race yet.
Yeah, no, it is very true. Going back to when you have people that say I've been everywhere in the world, more than likely they haven't been to Greenland. And Greenland is one of those destinations that is so special because it's the cultural side that makes Greenland unique with the Inuit communities. We visited a town, which I would probably just call it more like a village. 80 people live there. 80 people. Can you imagine? 80 people. Then they sing in the choir to us before we went on a 2-mile hike. So, some of these destinations that we visit, they're not explored, off the beaten path. We even chartered a new fjord that's never been explored before with Lindblad. So it's quite a unique way. There's always new places that we're looking to discover. One of them being, I'm sure you've heard a bit more about Antarctica with the fly cruise. So there's some interest. Clients don't want to sail across the Drake Passage. Choice flexibility. We announced last year a fly cruise. So you skip the Drake Passage. Within the first month, we have 1,400 requests for our fly cruise and are sold out of this upcoming season, which just started last month. So we're operating the fly cruise next season. But again, choice flexibility, 8 to 10 day voyages. Clients can fly round trips. So they'll operate from Puerto Natales, Chile. We offer a charter flight to King George Island. They board the ship in their expedition gear, walking through snow, boarding the Zodiac in Antarctica. Or they can fly one way, sail across the Drake the other way.
That's good as long as the airport at King George Island is open. We experienced that airport being closed 4 days when we tried to do a fly bridge. So you just...
That's true. There are some contingencies with it. That's one thing that I would always say, check the terms and conditions, because everything is weather permitting. But there are some guests that are looking at different ways to travel. So we try to give that flexibility for them.
Well, I always tell people, life is iffy, but if you want to guarantee, just take the dining room tablecloth off of the table and sit in the corner and put the dining room tablecloth over your head, and you'll be safe, and we'll bring you nourishment on a regular basis. But what a way to live your life, safe in the corner. I don't want to live my life that way, and I don't think most people do. So just be aware that the Drake Passage can be rough, but the airport at King George Island can be closed. So
yeah, that is very true. For me, I want to sail across the Drake. I'm up for that. I'm up for that adventure, but there's sometimes families traveling together that are looking for that. And another thing I want to touch upon, we're seeing a lot of interest with is multi-gen families traveling. And it's a new term called skip gen, where grandparents are bringing their grandkids on these trips. So we have this program called Global Explorers, and there's no minimum age for kids to sail.
I was just getting ready to ask you about that. So tell us more about that, because that is kind of a neat program.
Yeah, so we're the only expedition operator that has a dedicated kids program. Now, we don't have babysitters on board, and these vessels are much smaller, so there's no water slides, but it's an educational program for kids. They get a field research notebook. They'll go ashore with their parents and the expedition guides. If they're in the Galapagos, they'll have different bird checklists. They'll come back on board with a scientist. They might be studying algae with them. They'll even learn how to drive the Zodiac. So we see a lot of this, particularly for Galapagos in the springtime, in the summer, and Alaska in the summer. But yeah, we do a great job catering to multi-gen families.
Multi-gen or skip gen. I like the skip gen better. As a grandfather, I want to spend more time with my grandkids than I do my kids. I've been with my kids their whole lives, but to have that special one-on-one time with your grandkids is very, very unique. So the skip gen is becoming more and more popular. The Naples Daily News did a feature article on our agency a couple of years ago about multi-gen, and they came out and they interviewed us and took a lot of pictures and wrote this beautiful article. And it was on the cover of the business section, and the headline was, "Take the kids and pick up the tab."
I like that. And then you give your kids a break. They don't have to. They can do their own little vacation. But yeah, there's a lot of interest with this.
And I'll tell you something, folks. There's nothing better, absolutely nothing that I've experienced in my 72 years on the planet better than creating memories with your children and your grandchildren. Things that they'll be talking about long after you're gone. The memories that you create. I'm often reminded of a speech I heard one time, and the CEO of one of the largest beverage companies in the world, and he was talking about how much better dreams are than memories. And I was sitting there shaking my head. I go, okay, this guy may know a lot about running a beverage company, but he knows nothing about the importance of memories. And that's what travel like this is often about, is creating memories with people that you love.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, Rachel, it's been great having you on the show. I think people are going to walk away going, I want to do that. I want to know more about what Lindblad and National Geographic are doing in all these hard to get to, but must see destinations around the world. So thank you for coming on the show. And as I always remind our clients, listeners, watchers, whatever, enjoy yourself. It's actually later than you think.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks for joining us on the Luxury Travelers Podcast. For more information, head on over to luxurytravelerspodcast.com to connect with our team or leave us a message. Until next time, safe travels and savor the extraordinary.